Thank you, ma'am.
So, Rabbi Mark, your wife invited Louise.
I've been to Romamu. I've been to BJ. Hold on to that thought. I've searched all over for a place to pray. I found the mosh pit and knew that this was it. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray, actually white. I found community that is in tune with me, singing and dancing in our Zumaga. Come on, everybody, sing it with me. Some contemplation mixed with elation. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. Well, actually white. A chance to meet you. A chance to greet you, Joel. A time to deepen what it means to belong. Everybody sing! Let's have some fun tonight and spread some joy and light. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. Okay, Hoff, let's hear the harmonica. Oh man, you're as good as ever. Apologies to Neil Young, who someday will join us here. Keep on dreaming, Rabbi Mark. Okay, enough of the good times. All right, hi everybody, and welcome. So welcome, Joel. You look familiar. Dance camp? Is that where it?
Yeah, dance camp. Exactly.
Great. Are you a friend of Jesse Eisenberg's?
Well, really, all I know for sure is that we know. Oh gosh, I can't pull names, but your wife is active in this dance camp.
Yes, she is. Renee Brock.
Renee, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Well, welcome everybody. Rachel, Mitzi, Mel, Susan, Devorah, Hoff, and we are the few, but we are the mighty. And I can only take it from your presence here that you're interested in plagues. So why plagues tonight? Anybody answer the question? Why have I chosen this topic? Everybody can participate in the answering this question except for Devorah. Sorry. Why plagues tonight? We've had some plagues tonight. Think of Parsha. Think of the Parsha. It's Parshat Va'era. And where are we? We are in Mitzrayim. And this is where all the fun starts, with the beginning of the plague 7 this week, 3 next week. And we're going to try to cover all of them tonight. What we are not going to cover is the theological challenges that are offered and presented by divinity hardening Pharaoh's heart, and how that leads to each plague in turn, and how we're supposed to understand that. That's for a different time. Who knows? Maybe even next week, because the hits will continue next week with the last of the 3 plagues. But rather, tonight won't be just any night, because tonight we're going to be focusing on the wisdom of Ziony Zevit, a contemporary professor, American scholar of biblical literature and Northwest Semitic languages, and professor at the American Jewish University in 1994. He was awarded the Guggenheim Fellowship. And so we're taking a look right now at his Sweet Punim, and in a moment we're going to be taking a look at an article, at some teachings based upon an article that he wrote, contrasting the plagues with the days of creation. Now, why would he do that? Because he is a very close reader of the sacred text. And he noticed at some point that there was something going on that was running parallel, the plagues, to the creation story that he has lifted up for us. And I hope that you find this as illuminating as I. Please, at any time, unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment. I'm actually working from a screen share today, as opposed to you being able to see me right next to my slides. But this is where we're starting from. I suspect that no one's ever heard of him. Because I had never heard of him. And I cannot, just so you know, I cannot see all of you on my screen because maybe I can see more of you though. Elliot's here. Hey, El. Maybe I can, no. Let me see if oh, there we go. I can see everybody now. Fantastic. Okay, on a different screen. So this is the author. So let's jump right headlong into this. So here's a question before I show you the next slide, which is, can any of you name in order or sing in order the 10 plagues? The Eser Dakot. Around our Pesach table, sometimes we sing Eser Dakot, Makot, da 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 da. Eser Makot, 10 plagues, right? Or 10 afflictions. And so we've got a whole bunch of wonderful tunes like that, but I didn't bring that today to sing for you. Anybody name all 10 in a row, or can somebody start us off with the first or the first and the second? What's first? Come on, somebody. Dam. Okay. And in English?
Blood.
Blood on the tracks. Okay. Number 2. What's number 2?
Svardeya.
Which is what?
Frogs.
Frogs.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So frogs is 2. What's 3?
Kinim.
Kinim. Dam. Svardeya. Kinim. What's 4?
Heber.
What's that? Oh my gosh. What kind of a rabbi do you have? I mean, it's like you all should know this in the tip of your, what is it, Rachel? You have to unmute yourself. Say it again.
Arov. Ayin Resh Vav.
Again, Arov. Now, sometimes Arov refers to the cattle, but for our purposes, Arov can also, it means a swarm, so it can also refer to insects. Okay? Number 5, Dam, Svardeya, Kinim, Arov. What comes next?
I know.
You didn't know there was going to be a quiz tonight.
I can get the book.
Yes, you could get the book, or you could just, click on Chabad.com. Okay, I'm going to sing them for you. I'm going to watch your faces because you're going to go, oh, of course. Dam, Svardeya, Kini.
Wait a minute. We need to do with the wine. Dam, Svardeya, Kinim, I don't know. That's what we do at home.
Yes, of course. That's the minhag. That's the custom, to drop a little bit of wine.
Right.
Dever, pestilence, shchin, boils, barad, hail, right? Arbe, locust, choshech, darkness, right? Makat bechorot, the plague of the death of the firstborn. Okay, so I hope, for the rest of the night, you do better on all the tests that you're going to be having.
Oh, no.
So let's move now to, that's all right. I'm grading on a curve. Don't you worry about this. So let's take a look, first of all, at the text that brings us up to the point where where all of the plagues appear. Let's get back to, here we go. Here it is. Okay, let me just move this so I can see you. Okay. See that okay? Lachein emor livnei Yisrael ani havaya v'hotzeti etchem mitachat סבלות מצרים, והצלתי אתכם מעבודותם, וגאלתי אתכם בזרוע נטויה, ובשפטים גדולים. Say, therefore, to the Israelites people, who is doing the speaking here? Of course, it is Yahweh. I am Yud Hey Vav Hey. I will free you. Okay, so here's the first of the four statements that parallel the 4 cups of wine. I will free you from the labors of the Egyptians. I will deliver you from their bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. And the fourth one, of course, is I will bring you. And then it says, and through I will do all of this with extraordinary chastisements. Uvishfatim gedolim. Alrighty. What does all of that add up to? The chastisements, of course, are referring to the plagues. Continuing on. V'lo yishma alechem paro. When Pharaoh doesn't listen to you, right? It's not if, but when. V'natati yadi mimitzrayim. I will lay my hand upon Egypt and deliver my ranks, my people, the Israelites, from the land of Egypt with what? There's that expression again. Bishfatim gedolim, with extraordinary chastisements. One more page. What does divinity want? And what is the message that Moshe, well, actually, it's not going to be Moshe, but his brother Aaron speaking for him, because Motha is tongue. All right. Shalach, thank you. At least somebody got my joke. Shalach et ami ve'avduni bamidbar. So go down, Moses, let my people go. That line does not end with let my people go. This is important to know, that what immediately follows that, let my people go so that, or that they may, avduni bamidbar, that they shall worship me, right? So it's not just a matter of freedom. As you're well aware of, there's freedom from and there's freedom to. So the freedom from slavery, but the freedom to worship in the way that Yud Hey Vav Hey is requiring of the Israelites eventually. Devorah Lesk.
So is that God's reason for wanting the Israelites to be free, is so that they can, is that really the whole point? I want you people to worship me?
All right. I don't like the way you answer that question.
Right.
I asked it, I didn't answer it.
Yeah, you know, the way you ask the question is really implying a very needy, egotistic God. All right. God doesn't need, this is part of the plan. Right from the very beginning. This is the part of the plan, that we shall be a people that will bring the word, that each of us is made in the image of this God to the world, right? Which has a lot of ramifications. So worshiping me, it's a good question, right? And if with a whole night we could spend on God's motivation, right? And you might even be able to find some literature on that, but I ain't going there right now. Shalach et ami ve'avduni bamidbar. So remember that, because that's really important. There is a purpose behind all of this. Oh, Elliot, you're going to like this reference. What was his name? He wrote a jazz song. The Creator has a master plan.
Pharoah Sanders.
Pharoah, no, it wasn't Pharoah Sanders. He sang like this. And
Leon Chandler.
What?
Leon Chandler.
Leon, no, not Chandler. You're close.
Leon.
And then he would go, right?
He was ululating.
He would ululate in the middle of his songs. I can't remember who it. Okay, Leon, you're on the right track. I expect you to have that answer before the end of the session here. And it's not Leon Uris. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, he just writes books.
He writes books, correct. All righty. So let's now continue on the text, which is right there. Ko amar Adonai, bezot tedaki ki ani Adonai. By these extraordinary chastisements, shall you know that I am Yud He Vav He. Hine anochi makah. Or is it makeh? See, I shall strike the water in the Nile with the rod that is in my hand, and it will be turned into dam, which is the first of the plagues, into blood. And what will happen after that? What is the result? V'hadaga, it's not the Haggadah, hadaga, the fish, asher bayoar tamut, the fish that are in the Nile, they shall die. And not only that, the Nile will stink so that the Egyptians will find it impossible to drink the water of the Nile. So now here we're going to start getting into his argument for the plagues being a reminder that we're talking about God's reasons for doing this, Devorah, any motivation, that perhaps if we are reminded who the Creator is. Oh, Elliot, I'm not going to, this is going to really bug me for the rest of the night. Who the Creator is, then the whole world will know my name. Right? Remember, part of the reason for this is that God will be made great, and not only in the eyes of the Israelites, and the Israelites will spread the world and the whole world. By Yom Hahu Adonai Yehiyeh Echad U'Shemo, and his Shemo Echad. That in the rest of that paragraph, it speaks of that everyone will come under the same understanding that there is one God. Through the plagues, and now this is Professor Ziony, his words. When I have lines in the text, I'm kind of leaning on his article. Through the plagues, Yud He Vav He demonstrates that Yah is the God of creation. So now we're going to flip back and forth between the text in Shemot, in Exodus, and the text in Bereshit, and see what connections he is making. So we start now with chapter 7:19 in Shemot. And Yud He Vav He said to Moshe, say to Aaron, take your rod and hold out your arm over the waters of Egypt, its rivers, its canals, its ponds. Kol mikveh mimehem, all of its bodies of water, so that they may turn to blood. Any keen reader of Torah is looking for clues, is looking for words that repeat themselves, shorshim, roots that repeat themselves. Hi, Carol Ann. Hi, Judy. You look lovely behind your sunflowers. And the professor finds this in Genesis 1:10. Vayikra Elohim leyavasha eretz. God called the dry land earth, and called the mikveh hamayim, the gathering of the waters, he called that the seas or the ocean. Yamim. Vayar Elohim kitov. So you can see very clearly that what he has noticed is almost the exact same language. Mem kuf vav, right? Mikveh, like mikvah, right? A mikvah, that's a body of water. And he is now, again, pointing us back to the creation story. His words, the first plague of dam, of blood, demonstrates that Yud He Vav He is able to change the very nature of things. Continuing into the next three plagues, he's going to continue this very same argument. And perhaps you can use this for your Pesach Seder this year, that all of the plagues are to, again, point us back to Bereshit bara Elohim, when God began to create. Second plague, frogs. V'sherat hayoar sephardim. The Nile shall swarm with frogs. always reminds me of one of my favorite songs. One day when Pharaoh awoke in his bed, there were frogs in his bed and frogs on his bed, frogs in his bed and frogs in his head, frogs here, frogs there, frogs were jumping everywhere. And here it says it right in the text. Va'alu uva'u beveitecha. They shall come up and enter your palace, mishkavcha va'al mitatecha. Your bedchamber and your bed. I'm not sure what the difference is there in ancient times. Uveit avadecha uva'amcha. The houses of your, you see the word eved in there, which can be understood as a slave, but also a servant. So the house of your courtiers. And uva'amcha, your people. Not only that, uvatanurecha, in your ovens, in your tanurs. Uvamish arotecha, and your kneading bowls. So not only are you going to be able to cook, you're not even going to be able to prepare what you were cooking and prepare the bread. There were going to be frogs everywhere. Now, how does this upset the balance of nature? Well, clearly frogs are supposed to be staying in the water. They're not supposed to be living in your refrigerator, in your ovens, in your kneading bowls. Vayomer Elohim yishritzu hamayim sheretz nefesh chaya. Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures. This points us back again to the first chapter of Bereshit with the word shin resh tzadi, sheretz, a swarm of things, right? And here we have v'sharatz hayoar tzefardiim. Then the Nile shall swarm with frogs. So he's not necessarily looking for frogs in particular, but he is seeing the similar vocabulary to describe two very different occurrences, but as we know, we can draw some mighty interesting conclusions, or at least observations, from looking at this. He says the frogs behave incongruent with their nature. So frogs stop acting like frogs. This again is reminding us that we are not in control. And perhaps that is the lesson for Pharaoh, as much as he would like to think that he is in control, because remember, he sees himself as a god. He is not Hashem. Lice. Now, remember I said, I'm sorry. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, Emor el Haron. So say to Aaron, hold out your rod and strike the dust of the earth, et matcha, et afar haaretz, and it shall turn to lice throughout the land of Egypt. Kinim, or chinim, b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. So we're going now from the waters, which are mentioned first in Bereshit, to the earth, and eventually we're going to get to the sky. So here we have lice, which rise up from the dust of the earth and get into everything. Vayomer Elohim, totzei haaretz nefesh chaya lemina, behema v'remes v'chayato eretz lemina vayihi chen, and it was good. Let the earth, again, let the earth bring forth. We're pointing now back to the passages in Bereshit. Let the earth bring forth. So this corresponding to the lice, which is corresponding now to the creeping things. Bring forth every kind of living creatures, cattle, creeping things, remes, and wild beasts of every kind. Vayehi chen, and it was so. He gives us a little bit of history here. Lice discomfort the Egyptians, even though many of them, according to Egyptian tomb paintings, shaved their body hair. But we parents know well what trying to remove lice from the heads of our children is all about, which of course, where the expression nitpicking comes from, right? So that is why at our Seder, we have toys on the table. And when we get to the lice, we have little combs that people can comb out, the pretend lice in their hair or somebody else's hair. Let's stop here for a second. Questions, comments? Are you finding this anything you can use here? Anything interesting, problematic? Judy has now revealed herself to us all. Hi, Judy. Devorah-esque, please. And no more questions like the first one. I'll throw you out of class.
I do have more, but I won't. I'll just make a comment. This
Okay.
is so interesting. I wish I'd thought of this.
Yeah.
It's so amazing. I love it. I love it.
Great. Yeah, that's the life of when you study. You're never going to study everything. Yeah, Al.
Sorry. What it keeps hitting home for me is how it's in the tradition of the different attributes of God, and that it's sort of messaging to the power structure and the God figure of Pharaoh that, hey, just because God and God's wonderfulness created things in this harmonious way in Bereshit, this same God wields a terrible swift sword and can really strike hard with the same tools when angered by your actions.
Yeah. You know what that reminded me of is the second paragraph of the Shema. For such a long time, I had a difficulty with that paragraph, and I would skip over it. I refused to read about a God who would basically, in whose power to turn the world upside down from this balance that you just talked about, and maybe do so at a whim, until I understood for myself that we're really talking about yin and yang. We're talking about, if you don't take care, for instance, of this planet, the planet is going to turn. You're going to destroy it, and there will be no harvest, and there'll be no wheat to harvest, etc. So no oil to harvest as well. So yeah, and so this is what's happening, I think, which is the total turning of the creation story on its head, as a reminder. Divinity says, "Ani Adonai," right? I am God, and that's how the whole parsha begins, right? With that statement, I am God. And by the way, Elliot, Leon Thomas.
Leon Thomas.
Yeah, you see?
Yeah.
But I cheated. I looked it up.
Well, the question is, if people know who Leon Chandler was.
Who was Leon Chandler?
Leon Chandler was like this commenter in the 60s who was very radical in his age, but he was popular on radio, and he kind of turned people on to that kind of thing. You said you had recognized him, but you couldn't. He's in your collective unconscious.
Okay.
So is Leon Thomas. All right, ciao.
Thank you. But he wasn't a Torah commentator, so we'll skip by that for now. All righty. So next, here is the text in our parsha. Sorry, I need to go back. I need to share my screen. There we go. Ki im eincha mishaleach et ami. So this is again divinity talking to Moshe, who is then going to relate all of this to Aaron. And there were a lot of other people who went with him. There were heads of state who were part of that cohort that accompanied Moshe to Pharaoh. If you do not let my people go. Well, this is interesting now. This is not something that our professor here talks about, but that I'm noticing back to the second paragraph of the Shema, which is in Devarim, right? If you do not do this, then, right? It's the whole paragraph is an if and then paragraph attempting to keep things in balance and being in partnership with divinity. Hineni mashliach becha uva'avadecha. So I will let loose swarms of insects against you and your courtiers. V'amcha v'aticha et he'arov. There's the swarm. Umalu batei Mitzrayim et ha'arov. There's the word again. V'gam adama asher heim aleha. Like your people, your houses, the houses of the Egyptians, and the very ground they stand on shall be filled with arov, swarms of insects. So I couldn't help but look, well, how do they get insects from this? When sometimes in our Haggadot, it refers to, well, later on it's cattle disease. But how do we know these are swarms of insects? So I looked up the shoresh arov, and indeed it means a swarm. As a matter of fact, if you use Safaria, you just click on the word and it will give you all the different ways that it's used, and hifil and nifal and et cetera, if there are uses of it in the different grammatical ways. Arov. Now look at the word arov. Ayin resh vet. What word do you see in there? Forget swarm. What word do you see in there using the same shoresh? Devorah Lesk has unmuted herself.
Is it Arab?
It is exactly Erev. So what does, now look in the parentheses, a swarm, a mixture from incessant involved motion. What is Erev? When we say Erev Shabbat, what is Erev? What does this shoresh for a swarm, it means swarm, have to do with Erev? What is Erev a mixture of? Yeah, what?
Light in the dark.
Light
Light
and
in the dark.
That's right. That's right. Erev is different than Laila. Right, Rachel? Right. Erev is different than Laila. Laila is night, right? And the darkness will be coming up in the 10th plague. No, I mean the 9th plague. So here we have Arov, a swarm, a mixture of perhaps different kinds of flying insects. When I read this, a plague of stinging flies, oh my God. All righty, continuing. Again, stop me if you have a comment or a question.
Well, I was thinking that in the evening, a lot of times we do see fireflies and other bugs come out when you put a light on, you know.
Yeah, that's true. And
Maybe there's some relation to that.
That's true. So now we're going back to Bereshit, and we're going to see now how he is. This is going to be the sky reference, right? The flies are in the sky. Vayivarach otam Elohim, vayomer lahem Elohim, pru urvu. Oh, we know what that is. Be fertile, go and multiply. Fill the earth, umil'u et haaretz, v'chivshuha. Fill the earth and master it. Urdu bidgat haya ayam uva'of hashamayim. So we have two words that are important in this passage from Bereshit. Hashamayim, of course, is pointing us back to the flying, stinging, perhaps, insects that are is the plague. But there's one other thing here that's going on. V'chivshuha, that in our original directive, in the creation of the first human, we are given this charge: be fertile and increase, fill the earth, and to master it. Here in the plagues, again, Pharaoh is learning that he is not the master. And look at this. I think this is also mind-blowing, and looking at the definition of chavash, to subject, subdue, force, keep under, bring into bondage, make subservient. Right? In Rabbi Soloveitchik, Yosef Soloveitchik's blessed memory, a magnificent small book called The Lonely Man of Faith. He takes a look at the two creation stories, right? And it's a brilliant unpacking of what the differences between the stories and how we should see ourselves, in this case, in relation to the planet that we live on. And what does it mean in one story to master and subdue the planet, where in the other one we are partners with the planet? Two very different understandings, and one of which people use all the time for reasons that that have implications on our planet that are not good ones. All right, that we can strip bare, because we are here to master, as the masters of the planet. In Egypt, the flies not only multiply in the land, they fill the land. They fill the land. They get into everything, just like the frogs did. These are even more plentiful. After the fly plague, the situation in Egypt is a complete reversal of the one anticipated by the divine blessing to humanity, Pru Urvu, where God tells people to rule the fish of the sea, the winged creatures of the heavens, and all living creatures would creep on the earth. So here again, we see sea, heavens, and earth, right? Or in the order that the plagues appear, sea, earth, and heavens, and which is where the flies are flying around in the sky. In Egypt, these creatures are now totally out of control. It is they that rule the humans, not the other way around. The script has entirely flipped itself on its head. Breshit now is being totally upended by the plagues. The next plague is pestilence, dever. V'hine yad Adonai v'haya b'bchinecha asher b'sadeh basusim b'chamorim b'gmalim b'bakar v'atzon dever kaved ma'od. Then the hand of Yud Hey Hav Hey, Yad Adonai, will strike your livestock in the field, the horses, the susim, the mules, the asses, the chamorim, the camels, gmalim, the cattle, bakar, vatzon, and the sheep, with a very severe pestilence, dever. And again, if you look at the word dever, dalet vet resh, it means pestilence, plague, and very specifically cattle disease and cattle plague. Now, how does this now correspond to Genesis? Vayetzer Adonai Elohim min adamar. Kol chayot hasadeh. He formed Vayetzer. We use the language of the four worlds, right? Asiya and then Yetzira, and that, right? And then Bria and then Atzilut. The second one, Yetzira, is the world of formation. The world of formation. Sometimes people refer to it as the world of feelings. But if you think, I don't want to get into the four-world explanation right now, but it's the same shurish, right? So, Yud Hey Vav Hey formed out of the earth all the wild beasts, Chayat Hasadeh, all the birds of the sky, Of Hashemayim, Uyaveh et ha'adam, and brought them to the human, the Ot Ma Yikralo, to see what God, excuse the gender, would call them, what he, meaning Adam, would call them. And whatever the human called each living creature, that would be its name. I think it was 2 weeks ago we dealt with name. Oh no, there's last week in the breakthrough rooms, naming. So this was the job of the first human being, to look into the soul, right? To see right into the kishkis, into the DNA of each human being and name that human being. I like to think of it as that Adam was meditating on each animal, and the letters of the Aleph Bet, they kind of like came together in his mind. He drew from Chokhmah, he drew from the greater wisdom, and then they kind of like went through the top of the funnel, right? He got an idea in Bria, and then through the funnel, and then it came out at the end of the funnel, and then there's Yetzirah, the formation of a name. And letters came together. Ah, there's a sus, there's a bakar, there's a horse, there's cattle. And that's how it happened. The plague of pestilence affects animals. Again, these is the words of our professor, specifically field animals. In Genesis 2:18-20, the animals are created specifically for us. In the plague of pestilence, the domestic animals that were under man's dominion were taken away from the Egyptians. So here we have Natan. We have a give and take. I just presided over the funeral of my beloved father-in-law, Jonas Brockwald, Zichrono Livracha, and right before the tearing, Kriya, of the ribbons by the mourners, you say, Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach, that Yutevave gives, and then life gives and life takes away. It's part of the yin and yang of the balance. It's a lot to deal with in that moment, but certainly in our spiritual lives and our spiritual practices, the more that we sit with that life is always looking to be in balance with itself. So here, whole things gets thrown off. Man is created to what? To rule over, and now it's being flipped on its head. That which was first created for the first man was first removed from the Egyptians by the first plague directed specifically against created things, talking about what was given to man to look over, the domestic animals. And you can see things are not going in a very good direction here for Pharaoh or the Egyptians. So we continue on with our plagues. Anybody questions, comments, criticisms? You want your money back? No. Okay. Leon Thomas. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe v'yel Haron. Kachu lechem melo chafnechem picha kivshan. Take a couple of handfuls of soot from the kiln, right? So it must be talking about, the kilns that were used to bake, but could actually been maybe used, maybe from the kilns, bake what? It could have been used to bake the bricks, right? For the building projects. V'zraka Moshe Shemayim aleinei Paro, and Moses, he'll toss it, right? Nizrok. I always say to when my granddaughter were little, they want to put everything in their mouths, right? Everything they pick up. So you say, Zrok, Zrok. Throw it away. Throw it on the ground. Take a handful of soot from the kiln and let Moshe throw it toward the sky. Le'enei Paro, while Pharaoh is watching. V'haya la'avak al kol eretz Mitzrayim. That should become a fine dust over all the lands of Egypt. V'haya al adam v'al behema, on the human and on the beasts. L'shchin, the boils, porach avuot b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. They're going to break out in boils, not just the humans, but the beasts as well. You might say, this is unfair to the beasts. But remember, all of this is part of the signs and wonders, and everything that Pharaoh thinks that he's in charge of, he's going to lose control of. That's what this project is all about. Now, if you hadn't noticed, what did I do? No. Did I do that yet? No. Oh, wait, we did that, right? We did bar. Okay. Sorry. There we go. Okay. Boils does not fit into this argument of our professor. It falls outside of the pattern of Bereshit, but he does lean on something else. He admits this, that it didn't quite fit into his drush. A person afflicted with boil, but it does fit into something from Vayikra, from Leviticus. A person afflicted with boils is ritually unclean and is complemented by the stringent demands of Egyptian religion during the New Kingdom, and there's your dates, concerning the ritual and physical purity required of priests before entering a sanctuary. Aha! Egyptians considered themselves superior to other peoples. Pharaoh himself was a god, and his officers were priests. Perhaps the image of these superior, holier-than-thou individuals suffering from boils, a painful and unaesthetic affliction, was humorous to the Israelites and was considered a barb against Egyptian religion. I'm sure that the Egyptians were laughing all the way to their doctors. Which brings us to Hail, Varad. V'yatet Moshe et matehu al shamayim. So Moshe held out his rod toward the sky, and Yud-Heh-Vav sent down Natan kolot uvarad. Hail and the thunder and hail, right? And in the word kolot for thunder, you see the word kol, a voice, right? There's a sound that the heavens make. Uvarad. So what is varad? Look at the bottom of the page. It is hail, but goes even further. It is a hail that falls because of God's judgment. One thing to point out here, as that he doesn't mention either, but I noticed from his teaching, is, you remember in the creation story, it's Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. And Elohim is often thought of as the God of judgment, like the stern, the God of the Gevura, God. And Yud-Heh-Vav, God of Chesed, the kind, compassion. Now, these categories don't fit nicely here, obviously, because you would not think that a God of compassion would have to cause such havoc on a peoples in order for them to get a message. So maybe there's a greater personal psycho-spiritual teaching here, and also for us all as a nation, and as humanity. Halach eish arza, and fire streamed down to the ground. So you remember, according to the Midrash, the fire is within the hail. How the heck that is possible for there to be such extreme heat within a ball of ice, only God knows. As Yud-Heh-Vav rained down hail upon the land of Egypt. Now, does this have a parallel? Well, he looks now looking at both hail and the next plague of locusts as well. Because if you may not have firsthand experience of this, but I do, that I included in lyrics of a song that I wrote in the early 80s called My Garden Song. And it talks of one afternoon in the middle of June, blanketing the sky like a prophet of doom. It's hail, the size of a good hefty rock. Soon after I find that my garden's in shock. So hail has the ability to destroy vegetation. And it really did a number on my garden. Luckily, you can always start over if it's not too late. The next two plagues involved the destruction of another part of creation, primarily vegetation. What was not destroyed by the hail was consumed by the locusts. When these two plagues had run their course, Egypt could be contrasted to the way the world appeared after the third day of creation. The land brought forth vegetation, seed-bearing fruit with it, and underneath that you have it from the text, Vatotzei haaretz deshe esev mazria zera leminehu, seed-bearing plants of every kind. So we have creation and destruction. By contrast, in here, with the hail and locusts, we're told that nothing green was left of tree or grass of the field in all the land of Egypt. Ki im me'ein ata l'shaleach et ami, if you refuse, if you say no, hineni mivet machar arbe bigvulecha. Tomorrow, machar, I will bring locusts on your territory. And like we already said, what was not destroyed by the hail was consumed by the locusts. The last two plagues, darkness and the death of the firstborn. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe. Then Yud-Heh-Vav said to Moshe, Neteh yadcha al hashamayim, hold out your arm toward the sky, that there may be choshech, darkness, upon the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be touched, right? Vayamesh choshech. We're not just talking about the kind of darkness that we experience at night here, especially, in our modern times, where it's impossible to be in total darkness. But perhaps the closest I've ever come to experience was at a restaurant in Haifa that I went to years ago with Renee, Misada Choshech. Anybody have been there? Anybody heard of it? This is a restaurant where the waiters are blind and deaf. So they are, I'm sorry, I take that back. Some of the staff was also deaf, but everyone was blind. And when you walked into the restaurant, the front of the restaurant, they gave you a menu. You could still see, and you ordered outside of the room. And then your waiter, who was blind, would come and take you by the arm and lead you behind a curtain. And the minute you crossed over that curtain, it was a darkness beyond any kind of darkness I've ever experienced in my life. It was as if I were blind. The waiter led us to our seats and told us where everything was located on the table, so we shouldn't have any accidents. Now, the water was not poured, but he told us where the water was in proximity to our plates and our silverware, and we took care of ourselves in that way. If we needed to get up to go to the restroom, he said, let me know. But then soon after, out started coming the appetizers, etc. This doesn't even approximate the darkness that can be touched, that the rabbis tell us what this means in Egypt. What is described here is not simply the absence of light. The darkness is something physical. It is actually palpable, a darkness that can be touched. Vayamesh choshech. The Torah describes here the cessation of the alternation of light and darkness, of day and night, which of course, vayavdel ben yom v'layla, God separates day from night, light from dark, or right? Yet darkness and light exist side by side in geographically distinct places. Remember that the light, this darkness, did not fall over the Israelites. So it's kind of like a curtain fell on the Egyptians, a separation that, again, and I keep repeating myself, from the original idea of creation to separate the light from the darkness. Different here from tohu vavohu, from the chaos, because everything there, my impression is, all of this was swirling, ready to come forth into existence. The Israelites did have light. In short, in Egypt, God reverted the relationship between darkness and light to what had been prior to the end of the first day of creation. Vayar Elohim et ha'or ki tov v'yavdel Elohim ben ha'or uvein ha'choshech. That Elohim saw that the light was good and then separated the light from the darkness. In order to do that, there has to be darkness. Picture the yin and yang symbol. Even in there's a little bit of light in the form of the white dot inside of the darkness. Here, there is no light in the darkness. This is where it leads to my go-to verse, my go-to pasuk in all of Torah that has really done well for me. V'anachnu lo neda ma na'avod et Hashem ad bo'enu shama. We won't know what we're going to need, right, to serve or worship Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh until we arrive there, until we get there. This is when Moshe says to Pharaoh, we're going and we're taking everything with us. And this is where Pharaoh, of course, really freaks and said, no, you know, but by now needs to give in. And Moshe's reason for this is because when we get, how are we going to know what we're going to need? We need to take everything. Of course, Pharaoh remains suspicious of that, and which, of course, leads to the 10th and final plague. But this line is a wonderful line for spiritual growth and for entering into whatever practices that you feel called to, even when you're not sure why you're doing it. And that goes for things even other than spiritual practice. Or are there things that are not spiritual practices? I'm not sure that there are. But if you had the impulse one day to, you know, read War and Peace or learn how to bake muffins in the oven, or just to go, I need to get out of, to take a nice long car ride and go for a nice long walk in the Shenandoahs. You do it because you're not going to know why necessarily until you get there, what was driving you or what was informing you, may be a better way to put it. Which leads us, of course, to the 10th and final plague. Vayomer Moshe ko amar Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh kachatzot halayla. That's the expression for midnight, like that when the clock strikes 12. Ani yotzei betoch Mitzrayim. I will go forth among the Egyptians. Umeit kol bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim, and every male firstborn. A bechor is a male. That's why it's in parentheses, but it doesn't say that. It just says bechor, the firstborn in the land of Egypt, shall die. The final plague, the death of the firstborn, is only a forerunner to the complete destruction of all the Egyptians at the Red Sea or the Reed Sea. Here we discern an echo of what expressed in Genesis 1:26 when God said, we will make Adam in our image and after our likeness. Instead of creating, God is destroying human males who in form are like the prototype of Adam, of the first Adam, the archetype in his image, in God's image and God's likeness. So first, the firstborn, and then at the sea, all of Egypt, or at least those who pursued. They meet their deaths. So we have now the parallel between the creation of a human being and the death of human beings. At the end of the narrative in Exodus, Israel looks back over the still water of the sea at a land with no people, no animals, no vegetation, a land in which creation had been undone. Israel is convinced that its Redeemer is the creator of all creation. It is this implicit theological principle, and these are the professor's words. It is this implicit theological principle that motivates the literary pattern, and which is the argument that he's been making. God, who had just reduced order to chaos, was the same God who had previously ordered that which had once been unformed and void. I have one more screen share that I'm going to wait until the end to share with you. But I want to open this up to any reflections, how this landed with you. And if you don't know the name Leon Thomas, you can Google him. The Creator Has a Master Plan is the name of the song. And yes, Pharoah Sanders might even be playing on that tune. Maybe that's where you got it, Elliot. Carol Ann,
Pharoah Sanders' album.
it's on a Pharoah Sanders album?
That was the name of it.
Oh yes. Yeah, so he played, yes, right.
So he might have played on it.
Right. That's, we're going to get to the bottom of this after we're done. Any reflections? Well, Carol Ann, go ahead, Carol Ann. I'll unmute you.
Some
Go ahead.
concern about humans ruling over the other creatures, of the birds in the sea, the fish in the sea. Maybe I didn't understand it, perhaps. It's the first time I've ever encountered the English version of what you read. Do you have any, can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, first of all, I want to encourage you to open your Sefaria when we're done, or any chumash that you have with you, and read the first chapters. The first chapter of Breshit, of Genesis, because you will find that there. But that's only in one of the creation stories. So then you need to go into chapter 2, where you'll find the second creation of creation of human being story.
Oh.
Right? In one story, in the first story, it says, Zachar v'nekeva baratam. In both male and female, God made them, which brings forth possibly the image of one human being with both qualities, right? Of male and of Zachar and nekeva, right? Of male and female. In the second story, we all are very familiar with that, of Chava, of Eve being created from the rib, or some say actually it's a different body part, of Adam. And the instructions given to that creation is a little different than the instructions that are given. So go check that out yourself. And if maybe one Wednesday night I should give a little tutorial on using Sefaria. Would anybody find that helpful? I always refer to it. Does anybody here use it except for me and Devorah? And Elliot. Okay, it really is a treasure chest. Mitzi too.
But I would love it if you gave a thing, because maybe I'm using 20%, right?
Well, hey, I use 20% of it.
Well, I'm saying you can enlighten us as to how to.
Maybe it's a different 20%.
Yeah, good. There you go. Thank you, Devorah. You always shed more light on the conversation. Those of us who use Sefaria, so many of us call it going down the rabbi hole, as opposed to the rabbit hole. Because once you get started, there are some things that are only in Hebrew, but there's a lot that's in Hebrew and English in translation that very, very useful. Judy and Devorah.
Sorry, this is a little sidebar. Do you remember that movie, Defending Your Life, with Albert Brooks?
Fantastic movie. Go ahead.
And so you're talking about you're using 20%, but it was like everybody used like 3 to 4% of their brain, but like the really smart people, it's like, oh, there's a 10%er.
Yeah, Defending Your Life with Albert Brooks, one of my favorite actors of all time, and one of my favorite comedians of all time. Devorah and then Elliot.
That line that you said is your favorite line of Torah, that you won't know what you need till you get there.
Yeah, wasn't it part of the Ohala? It's a lot of times. A lot of times it's used.
Where is it?
Where is that line?
Is it in Bereshit?
It's in next. No. It's in next week's Parsha. Bo.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
No, not Bo. Bo.
What?
Bo knows.
Okay, I'll look for it.
If you throw enough stupid things out there, eventually somebody might laugh. Elliot, you had something.
Oh yeah, just going back to Carol Ann's question and your points. In Christian, my understanding is that in the current Christian theological, social world now, with climate change especially coming on us, this distinction between mastering the the other forms in the world versus shepherding and protecting and shaping basically the world to enhance the other forms is presenting a huge schism. I mean, there are those who say we should be caring for the earth, and others who say, oh, it's in Torah or it's in the Testament to lord over the earth, so we're not doing anything wrong here.
Yeah. For those who see this as diametrically opposed, it creates all the problems that we face.
Or the reason for taking action to solve these problems.
Exactly right. So those, especially, this is in social justice circles, especially for young Jews who are finding their doorway into a Jewish expression in that way. This is a very important text to point towards. Absolutely. Yeah. Let me share with you the last thing that I am going to use, I think, at my Seder this year, and see, this is when I'm rushing through things, sometimes I forget to cite it, but I'm sure I can find it, and I'll send it along to all of you. Let me take a picture of who's here. Gotcha. So this is a listing of the 10 plagues, and gosh, what is her name? It's a Jewish organization that works all across the world. I'll think of it while I'm reading. All right, so let me screen share this with you. So it pulls out things that perhaps we should keep in mind for each of the plagues. Dam, blood. We comfort and mourn those whose blood has been spilled. Tzfardeya, frogs. We protest the proliferation of violence. Kinim, lice. We stop infestations of hatred and fear. Arov, wild animals or insects. We appeal to all people to act with humanity. Dever, pestilence. We overcome the sickness of racism and bigotry. Shchin, boils. We tend to those who suffer from disease. Barad, hail. We respond to storms and disasters that claim lives. So these are all promises. Arbe, locust. We fill the air with voices for change. Choshech, darkness. We bring light to those who live in the shadows. Makot b'chorot, death of the firstborn. We inspire the next generation to carry on the struggle for a better world. So our tradition is rich with interpretations and reinterpretations. I am so happy that I found this teaching by Professor Ziony, Ziony Zevit, Zevit. And no, I have no idea if he's any relation to Rabbi Sean Zevit, but I am sure going to ask him. And I'm happy to have shared this with you this evening. Any last closing remarks, observations?
Can you put that back up? I wanted to take a picture of it.
I'll send it. I'll send it. Oh, here you go. No, I'll send it to everybody.
Okay.
I'll take a picture. I'll take a picture of it and send it to you. Also with Leon Thomas's name, and to see defending your life. We we had a treasure chest of wonderful things to draw on tonight. Before we close, there's an important voice we need to hear from.